There's also an expanding effort by the Trump administration to deport some student activists. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says he's revoked at least 300 student visas from people alleged to have taken part in pro-Palestinian campus protests. So ICE agents arrested Mahmoud Khalila just a few weeks ago. He was one of the leaders of protests last year at Columbia University demanding a ceasefire in Gaza. Khalil is a legal resident with no criminal record. He's now in a detention facility in Louisiana fighting deportation. So these moves are raising concerns about possible First Amendment violations. Rubio citing a provision in the Immigration and Nationality Act that authorizes him to revoke the visas of foreign national students on the grounds that their presence or activities have, quote, potentially serious and adverse foreign policy consequences. So is that explanation enough? What are some of the legal ramifications of this? That's why we've brought in criminal defense attorney Josh Kolsrud to give us some insight and better understanding of this. Josh, thank you for being here this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Obviously, international students have First Amendment rights for free speech, but I know that their visas can make it really tricky. How does this play a role in how they deal with these arrests?
Sure. So in the case of the students who are in the removal process, it really depends on what their status is in the United States. So if you have a student visa, your rights are much less than, let's say, if you have a green card or lawful permanent resident status. And it's the State Department's prerogative to be able to grant people a student visa or to revoke it. Now, Marco Rubio can revoke a student's visa, but that doesn't mean that he can just deport or remove anybody when he wants to. So once a student visa is revoked, then they go through a removal process where they have much more due process rights than they did with appealing whether or not they should retain their visa status.
When did these protests or demonstrations cross the line that it would lead to an arrest? Because, you know, many of them we've seen are peaceful, but yet there's arrests that are following, and some may not be, which would lead to more grounds for an arrest.
So President Trump outlined what the government strategy is going to be in his January 29th executive order. In that executive order, he cited 18 U.S.C. 241, which is conspiracy against rights. It's a rarely used statute, but they are going to be using it to target these student protesters, to say that these student protesters crossed the line of First Amendment speech when they targeted Jewish students, and also people that weren't pro-Palestinian, violating those students' rights to free speech, violating those students' rights to not be intimidated. That's going to be the basis of the Trump administration's arguments.
And so obviously a lot of these students, most are fighting their arrests and trying to be able to keep their visas, whatnot, and continue staying here in the country to go to school. What's the process now? Because there are a lot of organizations that are offering their free services to help these students fight these arrests.
Yeah, so when you are in the process of losing your visa or in a removal process as well, you're not appointed a free attorney like you would be if you were charged with a crime. So there are a lot of organizations who have plenty of money that are supporting these students by providing them legal assistance. Now, if you're going through the process and you have a student visa, you have administrative remedies. But there was a Supreme Court case in 1999. It was Janet Reno versus the ADC. And in that case, the Supreme Court said that they have limited jurisdiction to hear cases of targeted political removals. So meaning that, so like in 1999, there was also a pro-Palestinian movement. And the Clinton administration and the George Bush administration before it targeted certain types of political speech, certain types of protesters. And the Supreme Court said, well, you know, whether or not it's legal or not legal, we don't have jurisdiction to review it. So the protesters in these cases, they can't argue like selective prosecution. They're going to have to mainly rely on whether or not their First Amendment rights were violated. So that's going to be the main argument.
Okay, and it'll be really interesting to see how this sets precedent, obviously, when it's in court. So
yeah, so whenever there's a lot of arguments about this, it means that the law isn't clear. And so the Trump administration is choosing cases that, you know, they believe have the most amount of evidence that they were doing activities in addition to political speech.
All right. Josh, we always appreciate your insight and your just explaining it to us so on a complicated process. Thank you so much. Josh Kolsrud.